What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Young Guns podcast. Today, we'll be talking about Luca's beloved Montreal Canadiens. How did they start the year? What's going on with the team? And how do we project them going forward? So, Luca, I'll let you take this one away right off the bat.
Yeah, so no, it's been an interesting start to the year for the Canadians. I think that, through 4 games so far, there's been some ups and downs. I think that, for a team that's still in the midst of a rebuild, I think that's normal. They haven't played bad hockey. I don't think they've played fantastic hockey either, though. But there's some positives and there's obviously some negatives to the team, and I think that watching this team over the course of 4 games, I'm enjoying watching certain players and I'm enjoying, the way they're playing in certain situations. But at the same time, there are some, signs of concern and things that I think they need to work on if they want to, get to the next step. Obviously for Montreal, they lost, Patrick Laine early on in preseason. So not having him for the start of the year has been a little bit tough in terms of their, forward core, but they've seemed to find a way to score goals, and they haven't been able to find a way to really, the last couple of games, keep the puck out of the net per se. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So, just kind of to jump in, pretty much, I mean, if you look at the stats here, Cole Caulfield's had a really good start to the year. 4 goals in 4 games. Caden Gooley's been probably Montreal's best player through 4 games. 4 points +6. He's been really solid defensively. Juraj Slafkovsky, I find his start hasn't been great, although he is a point a game currently with 4 points in 4 games. I still think there's another gear that Slafkovsky can take it to, but it's a positive sign that he's still getting points despite not playing at his best.
Yeah.
And then obviously you have Lane Hudson, who's got 4 points in 4 games as well. He's been a revelation for this team from the beginning since he came in. He's looked fantastic. And then there's some pleasant surprises. Obviously Matheson and Suzuki, kind of just doing their thing. Emil Heineman has been fantastic since he's been entered into the lineup during
Exploded at training camp.
That's it. He's been fantastic. And then, some guys that haven't really, been great. Newhook, only 1 point through 4 games. Obviously, you look at another guy like Kirby Doc, only 1 point through 4 games. A little bit disappointing for that second line, but Montreal are, like I said, still trying to figure out, some stuff over there. And then in net, we obviously have to talk about the big story, which is Sam Montembeault through 3 games. 203 goals against average, 942 save percentage, 2 wins, 1 loss. He's been fantastic for Montreal through 3 games for him this season. Caden Primo, the only game that he played, struggled in that one. Obviously, I think Montreal expects a little bit better out of Caden Primo out of the start that he currently had. So, Zach, what are your thoughts just early on with the Canadiens, and how do you think they look so far?
Well, I think they carried forward a lot from how they ended the year last year in terms of, their top line is able to score. They banked 2 with the big unit, 2 or 3 with the big unit on the power play. Slav has been able to contribute. Obviously, Cole Caulfield has been scoring at will. He's obviously scored the great goal at the Bell Center against Linus Olmark, and he's been
Your beloved Ottawa Senators.
Yeah, exactly. And he's been absolutely electric to start the year. Suzuki is doing his thing. I think the worry for them, just like last year, was their secondary scoring post trade deadline after they had traded Sean Monahan and had lost Kirby Doc last year. But Kirby Doc is back, right? But, I think Habs fans should be a little bit patient with him from the kind of injury he came back from. He's still getting his footing here. He doesn't look like the same player yet. And obviously, Patrick Laine is not on his wing. That was the projected second. He was going to be the projected second line winger for this team. They'll get him back at some point, probably in the winter. Alex Newhook got the goal, him as well against the Sens. Just 1 point. Yoel Armia is not the $4 million player that they've hoped he would be for them. And then you got you got guys like Oliver Kapanen, who's exciting. I think there are a lot of components to his game that resemble a full-time NHLer, and he seems very confident out there. And obviously, Emil Heineman, I could say the same thing about him. Two guys who had really great training camps and who are really, establishing themselves and in sort of these bottom six roles for the Canadians. For the blue line, there's no real concerns. Lane Hudson, I think, is the standout. Gooley's been very good, but Lane Hudson is the standout just because of how electric he's been. There was so much hype, as coming out of college with Lane Hudson, and he's lived up to the hype pretty much right away. He played 2 games last year, 2 assists, and he's carried forward that same tally this year with 4 points in 4 games. And he's shifty. He's hard to get the puck off of. He's got poise. He's got great vision. He has a lot of those qualities. I'd like to compare him to I'm not going to say he'll get to that level because it's too early to predict with him, but he reminds me a lot of Quinn Hughes out there. And if we segue to this, how far will the Habs take it this year? Are they going to be contending for a playoff spot come trade deadline? Are they going to be in a playoff spot? Or are they just going to be, out of it, and there's just going to be a small progression compared to last season? But I think with a guy like Lane Hudson, as a Sens fan, I really have no sentiment for the Habs right now. But the kid is electric, and I think they go as far as Lane Hudson could take them, because Lane Hudson is basically the massive upgrade to this roster that they didn't really have for the majority of the season last year. And in net, Montembeault has been doing his thing as well. He obviously started the year off with a shutout against Toronto, played well against the Sens. And if they get good goaltending from Montembeault and they get Lane Hudson to keep growing his game, I think the sky is the limit for this team, and they might just be in the playoff mix come trade deadline. What do you think?
Yeah, so I do definitely agree with that. I think Montreal is one of those interesting stories to start the year. I think they're a team that is underrated in terms of, I think people are underestimating just how good Montreal can be, and I think obviously with the addition of Lane Hudson, that changes their blue line a little bit. Obviously, if Montreal can continue to just not necessarily play 500 hockey, but if they can have a little bit of a winning record by the time Patrick Laine comes back, I think there's some damage that can be done for this team and this organization. There's a lot of potential in this group. I've been very impressed with the young talent that's come up for this team, and obviously some guys also in the AHL that have looked really good that can also make the jump eventually. So I think Montreal's looking good. The only thing is, obviously, if you go look at their team stats a little bit, through 4 games this year, they have 2 wins, 2 losses, right? They're at .500 currently. They've scored 12 goals forward, 13 against. They're averaging about 3 goals forward per game. They're conceding about 3.25. Their power play to start the year has actually been pretty good at 23.5%, and their PK has been pretty good at 92.9%, which is a positive compared to last year. Obviously, it's only through 4 games, so take that with a grain of salt. However, there is a concern to this game, only taking 26 shots per game and shooting and conceding about 33.3 shots per game. The reason that's a concern is because let's look at Jay Fresh's model. So at 5v5 expected goals per 60 through the first 4 games of the year for Montreal since October 15th, which was yesterday, there are 11th in the league in expected goals forward per 60, which is pretty good. If you look at the company
At 5-on-5, yeah.
At 5-on-5, that's pretty good. Like, you cannot really ask for more than that. Some teams that are up there that are pretty good as well, including the Rangers and Carolina. So, being in the top 11, I think, is really impressive. In terms of 5v5 goals against per 60, they're worst in the league at 4.42, right? Which is not very good at all. And the reason for that is basically what this model suggests is Montreal is scoring, at a decent rate 5v5, and they're getting good 5v5 offense. But defensively, their goaltender's keeping them in it, right? Montembeault has kept them in it through the 2 games, both against Ottawa and against Toronto. Obviously, not his best performance against Pittsburgh, but it happens. But basically, what this model is suggesting is that Montreal is giving up about 4.42 goals against per 60 that they should technically be giving up since October 15th. That Sam Montembeault has basically kept Montreal in it for the start of the year. So that begs a little bit of a concern. And the reason why is I don't think Montreal have looked great defensively. I think that that's been a real big concern for this team. I think apart from, Caden Gooley, who I think has probably been the most solid and most complete Habs defenseman through 4 games, I don't think everybody else has looked particularly great, on the defensive side of the puck. Lane Hudson, obviously, look, he's going to make mistakes and he's going to put himself in positions that, can be risky at times. I don't think he's played bad defensively. I think he had a rough game against Pittsburgh on Monday night, which would have made it look a little bit worse than what it was. But I think through 4 games, he's actually been pretty solid. Same thing with Mike Matheson. I think he also had a rough game against Pittsburgh, and these stats are also a little bit, let's say skewed because of that Penguins game that they lost 6-3 about, where I think they played really bad hockey. But, guys that I think we need a little bit more from, obviously that third pair of Arbor Xhekaj and Justin Barron doesn't work. They need Jaden Struble back in the lineup because I don't believe the Barron and Xhekaj is a pairing that can work. David Savard through 4 games hasn't really been at his best. I think he's been good and he's had some moments that he's looked good. Obviously, we need a little bit more out of Big Play Dave in order for the Canadiens to be successful. But I think besides that, I don't think it's as bad as people make it seem. I think they need to work on their defensive structure. If they can figure that out and they can, work on that a little bit more and obviously still continue to get good goaltending from Sam Montembeault, and obviously, hopefully Caden Primo can provide them good goaltending as well. I do think that there's some potential here, but it starts in the defensive side of things, right? And Montreal needs to work on that because obviously, in order for you to make the playoffs and be competitive, you have to be good on both ends of the ice. And Montreal's been good on the offensive zone, not really great in the defensive zone, in my opinion.
No. And I think with the Habs, their third pairing, like you mentioned, Xhekaj and Barron, Xhekaj hasn't been effective. I think he's only been marginally effective at the NHL level in terms of actually, fulfilling his role as a defenseman, being good in transition, and, doing his job in the limited minutes that he plays. And Justin Barron has looked like a guy with no confidence out there. So let me ask you this. How long is it going to take until we see a Logan Mailloux potentially in the Habs lineup this year? I know Struble is going to come back at some point, and I think he'll solidify that number 5 defenseman spot.
Right.
But do you, with a guy like Barron struggling, and obviously, Xhekaj's not doing himself any favors, can Habs fans expect to see Logan Mailloux, who obviously dominates the American Hockey League, had a decent preseason, but, Coach Martin St. Louis said, we want him to perfect some things at the American Hockey League level, just in terms of timing and, being consistent at the professional level. He's got all the physical attributes, but it's about kind of maturing his game a little bit. Do you think it's going to be soon, or do you think Logan Mailloux doesn't really get a shot until next season when he's 100% ready to go?
I think there's a chance that they call him up. I think the problem is too with Barron is, he's waiver eligible, and I think for Montreal they still believe that they've got a player there. I don't think Justin Barron has shown over the last, let's say, 2.5 seasons that he's been in Montreal. I don't think he's shown much progression. I haven't really been impressed with his game through the first 4 games. I think the addition of Struble, which I believe he was given the green light today to play, so hopefully he's in the lineup tomorrow when they play LA. That would be a huge boost for them. Or if you're watching this, let's say tomorrow, it would be hopefully that he's in the lineup tonight against LA. But pretty much in this situation, they do need Jaden Struble back. I think Jaden Struble provides a little bit of assurance in that decor. I think it makes a player like Arbor Xhekaj and also Justin Barron better. I think Struble's very steady and he's smart on the puck. So I do think that the addition of Struble will definitely help the Canadiens defense. The other question, obviously, that you asked me is Logan Mailloux. I don't think calling up Logan Mailloux right now would make a lot of sense. I think the reason you sent him to Laval was to obviously perfect his things. Obviously, he had a 4-point night in his first game back in the AHL. We all know what Logan Mailloux is capable of doing and what type of player he can turn out to be. The thing with Logan Mailloux, I think, though, is if he's able to work on his defensive game in the AHL and really perfect it, like Marty St. Louis has said, I do think that, I would not be surprised if by, let's say, early November or late November, early December, he's on the Montreal Canadiens and maybe he's on that team full time, right? I would not be surprised because I do think that he's a lot more talented than Barron. I think he's a much better player than Justin Barron. But I do think that Montreal needs to also give Barron maybe a little bit more time just to see how he develops over the next couple of games, and also give Logan Mailloux an opportunity to, get his feet settled into the AHL, let him play games, let him continue to dominate, let him continue to have his confidence so that when he gets back up to the NHL level, he can solidify that spot full time and he won't have to go back. Because he had a decent preseason, but you can tell that his confidence wasn't fully there, right? So to rush him into the NHL right now after only 4 games, I think would be a mistake for him. I think you have to let him go to the AHL, continue to let him, become the player that everybody expects him to become in the AHL, and let him dominate. And then when he's played a couple of games and he's able to finally become the player that he wants, and Barron still struggles, then you can make that decision to say, you know what, we want to bolster our decor. We believe that Mailloux is going to be a better, let's say, fit over Barron, and then you make that decision to decide whether you want to keep Justin Barron in the lineup or not. But as of right now, I think it's important for Struble to come back in, let Struble play games, and obviously put Montreal in a position where they have to make decisions that are essentially tough, right? But I'm more excited to see what Jaden Struble is going to do. I want him back in the lineup. I think Montreal needs him back in the lineup, and I think he's an underrated player. I don't think Jaden Struble gets as much love as people as Montreal fans would like to have around the league, but I think he's an underrated defenseman that provides a lot for Montreal. So hopefully he'll be in the lineup against LA, and Montreal can have him, continue to develop, and at the same time, maybe it'll change that third pair around a little bit. So
Yeah.
we'll
So
see.
before we get to the Habs' upcoming schedule,
Right.
if you look at their their 4 lines, I'll just name them out. Obviously, you know what the top line is. I don't have to say it. Second line, Newhook, Doc, Armia. I kind of mentioned it before. And then you on your bottom 6, you got Josh Anderson, playing with Evans and Gallagher. And then you got Dvorak, Emil Heineman, and Oliver Kapanen on another line. Do you see a sort of reshuffle with these lines? Maybe from lines 2 to 4, do you see a little bit of a reshuffle just to get kind of the chemistry going? Give different looks, try to create more 5-on-5 offense, or do you think that's going to be the lines are going to be pretty stable now for at least the next 20 games or so?
I don't know if there's going to be lineup changes. I think for me, though, if there's one thing that I would do, I would try Emil Heineman in the top 6. And the reason I say that is you look at Emil Heineman across the first 3 games of the year, and I know it's early, but I think he's been a standout player. And I think if you look at Joel Armia with Kirby Dach and Newhook, I think over the course of 4 games, you can tell that it hasn't really worked for those 3 guys. I think with Heineman, you're providing a player that can shoot the puck. You're providing a player that's played in the top 6 in the AHL and looked pretty good doing it. And I think this is a guy that if he's given, 2 really skilled guys in Alex Newhook and Kirby Dach, it could help elevate Kirby Dach's game a little bit, knowing that he has a great shooter in Heineman. And it could also allow you to see what you have with Emil Heineman. I don't believe Joel Armia is a top 6 forward in this league. And so I don't believe that it necessarily makes sense to have him play in the top 6. I think we've already tried the Josh Anderson experiment, and we know it can't work. So I think at some point, it's early on in the year. Why not experiment and try it out? Why not put Emil Heineman in a top 6 position, and say, you know what, run with it, right? We need someone there until line A comes back. Maybe you can be that guy, right? And I think through 3 games, the 3 games that he's played, he's looked fantastic. So why not, right? There's nothing for him to lose. And if Heineman gets in that spot and looks good, it just betters your team. You know what I mean? So that's what I would do. I don't think I would touch anything else. I think the bottom 6 has looked relatively good. I think Gallagher, Evans, and Anderson have actually been a pretty decent line. So I wouldn't really touch that. The only line that I would really touch, let's say, is that second line, maybe throwing Heineman with Kirby Dach and Newhook, and then putting Armia with Dvorak and Kapanen. I think that could be a really good defensive line as well on that 4th line. That's what I would do.
Yeah, I like that take.
Personally. And then on defense, I mean, Lane Hudson's playing with Savard. You have Matheson with Gooley. And then obviously, I think in an ideal world, you probably have Struble and Barron or Jacky. I mean, either one. I think Jacky is a little bit better than Barron, so I'll give the edge to Jacky and Struble. But maybe they decide to do something different. I don't know, but they need Struble back in the lineup some way, somehow. And then right now, your goaltender obviously is Montembeault. Primo, after that game against Boston, I would not be surprised if he doesn't see the net until probably Philly, which is going to be Sunday the 27th. He probably won't play before then. So just my opinion. But if you look at Montreal's upcoming schedule over the course of the next 5 games or so,
LA.
I think there's some interesting matchups. Obviously, you've got LA, you've got the Islanders, and then the Rangers, and then you've got St. Louis, Philly, Seattle, and Washington before ending the month of October. Over these next 7 games, Zach, what do you think Montreal's record could look like?
Over the next 7 games, this is what I could predict. I wouldn't be surprised if they're 4-3 in the next 7 games.
Okay.
Here's why. I look at the game at home against LA. I'm like, the way I see it is, obviously I think Darcy Kemper is going to get the start for LA. He was very shaky in the game against the Sens.
Actually, he's hurt. He's day to day, so he might not play. There's a chance they put Phoenix Copley in net though, because Riddick's in nets tonight.
So Riddick is playing tonight, so he may not be ready for tomorrow night. I see the game at home against LA. I do view LA as a good team that I think will be in the playoff mix this year, if not a lock playoff team. But I see that as a game that they could win. Then you travel to Long Island to play against the Islanders. That's another team that is struggling to score goals out of the gate. Hasn't had kind of the best start so far on their Patrick Roy. That's maybe another game you could get. And then you play against the Rangers. The Rangers the Rangers are a great team, off to a fantastic start. Let's write that game off. So let's say you're 2-1 there. Then you play St. Louis at home after a couple of days break. Maybe you take that one and then you lose on the back-to-back against Philly. You pick one up, you lose the other. And then you get Seattle and Washington. Seattle is a team that's definitely that's going to definitely be exciting, because I think they play a similar style to the Canadiens. They're a team that kind of lacks detail defensively right now. And I think at 5-on-5 is just very exciting in open play, and they got a lot of creativity. I could see that being a high-scoring game that could go either way. And then you get a team like the Capitals that have played 2 games so far. They're a team that's hard to predict right now, just because both games 1 and 2 kind of went opposite ways. But that's another team that I think is going to be able to score a bunch of goals this year. Obviously, they got better off forward, and they added Jacob Chychrun on their back end. I see the Habs winning one of those 2 games, either against Seattle or against Washington. So then it pretty much comes down to them being 4-3, which is, considering they already played 4 games, their record would be decent. At the end of October, I think the Habs could have the potential to either be a game or 2 above 500 here. What do you think?
I agree. I do agree. I think 4-3 makes a lot of sense. I think for Montreal, though, compared to last year, like they showed last year that they were able to compete even against, let's say, some of the best teams, but they lost a lot of games by 1 goal, right? Montreal was a team that last year was in pretty much every game. Like even the Penguins game, it's a 6-3 loss. Obviously, an empty netter goes in, so it's really a 5-3 loss in that game. And then Boston, obviously, it was a 6-4 loss that turned into an empty net goal, which was really a 5-4 loss, and that's a 5-4 loss in that situation. Actually, it was a 6-4 loss, but there was no empty net. So either way, right, like they've been closer games. I don't think the Penguins game, you look at the 6-3 result and you go, okay, it wasn't a close game. I think it was, if you look at it from, the eye view, I guess. I look at the game against LA as a trap game. I don't think Montreal wins this game tomorrow. I'm going to be honest. I think Montreal struggles against LA, especially at home. I think LA is going to be on the second half of a back-to-back, and Montreal usually struggles against teams that are on the second half of a back-to-back. It's like a crazy stat that they have, but they don't do well against them at all. So I think it's going to be a trap game. I think they're going to lose that game tomorrow. The Islanders, I do think they're going to win that game. I think Montreal's usually played the Islanders pretty well. They're a team that seems to always have their number, and they seem to enjoy playing the Islanders. The Islanders have taken some games here and there, but I do think Montreal's going to win that game. Then they have 2 days off before playing the Rangers. I'm going to be honest with you. I think they win this game as well. Montreal always tends to play the Rangers very interestingly. It's never a game where I find that the Rangers are always dominating Montreal. I feel like Montreal always plays a good game against the Rangers. I don't know if that's just because they're an original six team or what the deal is, but I do think Montreal beats the Rangers. I think it's going to be a surprising victory for them. So I think right now you're 2-1, kind of like what you said. Then you have St. Louis and Philly. The reason I don't think they're going to go 4-3 is because I think they're going to lose one game in overtime. I think that overtime game is going to be against St. Louis. I think they're going to lose to St. Louis at home in overtime. So that'll put them at 2-1. They'll probably beat Philly. They usually do well in Philly. And they're probably going to give Primo that start, considering he's not far from Philly. And his dad, he played in Philly. He loves playing in Philly. So I think Caden Primo probably gets that start. Maybe Montreal loses that game. So you're now 2-1. Then you have Seattle. I think Montreal beats Seattle. I haven't really been totally impressed with Seattle, although I say that they scored 7 against the Preds. So, maybe they're on to something a little bit interesting, but I do think Montreal beats Seattle. And then Washington's a tough game. I think Montreal is going to finish this 3-1. I think they're going to get 3 victories against the Islanders, the Rangers, and Seattle. I think they'll lose to LA, St. Louis, and also Washington in overtime. Or Washington, but they'll lose to Philly in overtime. And then Philly, chances are they'll probably beat Philly as well. That'll be 4-2-1 is what I think that they'll do. I think they'll have that record. I think they'll beat the Capitals.
Interesting. I think
that could be. That's what I'm hoping for. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I think that's what I'm hoping for.
That's a good shout. But I think, like you mentioned, the back-to-back and Primo getting one of the 2 starts. Obviously, Primo didn't look good in the first game against the Bruins. Obviously,
Right.
The Bruins are, that's a tough game. You're playing on the road against the Bruins, division rival, very good team.
Right.
And they've been able to score goals this year, quite a bit. The Boston Bruins, but what kind of Caden Primo are you getting? And I think most likely he'll get the start against Philly, like you said, with the affiliation to his dad there.
Right.
But it depends what kind of Caden Primo you're getting. You need to get the guy who's gonna be able to kind of, you showed the numbers before. They need a guy right now until they shore up things defensively. They're gonna need a guy who's gonna get them some saves.
Right.
And let's say Caden Primo starts 2 out of these next 7 games, then you have a situation where he's got to play well, or else they could drop the ball there. But Montembeault has been great so far. He looks very solid in the 3 games that he's played, and I think he's going to be able to at least carry it forward. I really trust Montembeault as a guy that could elevate as their starter. He did it. He's done it briefly, obviously, for about a year and a half. But now that he's shown that he could do it to start the year, I think that I just have more confidence in him to get the job done.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the other thing too is I look at the schedule and I'm like, where do you like in every single game so far, with how spread out the games are between each other, where does Primo come in? Right? Like, he's not starting tomorrow. He doesn't
one of the
start
back-to-backs for sure, but
right.
maybe
But that's about it, right? You don't give him any other game. Unless, I don't know if Montreal has a back-to-back between the Washington game and the November game. I can check that now, actually. If I go to November 1st. No, you see, so then they would be in Washington and then Pittsburgh on Saturday. So you're looking at potentially having Primo start that back-to-back and then probably not start until maybe Buffalo, right?
Yeah,
And
it
then,
could be. It could be. It could be
that back-to-back at the end of November, right?
Yeah, it's not like we're still at the beginning of the season. Montembeault's fresh and there's gaps between games here. It could be that we just get Primo for 1 game. I suggested 2, just saying
Yeah.
maybe throw him in for an extra game, try to get him going as well. But it could very
Maybe
well
the
be that he just
Seattle,
plays one
maybe
game.
what they'll do, maybe they give him the first half of the back to back instead of the second half. Maybe they'll give him St. Louis on Saturday and go, you know what, we'll give you the first half of the back to back, at least with the team that's more, let's say, fresh because they're going to be on 3 days off, and then give Montembeau, let's say, the second half of the back to back. So at least if Montreal's tired, they have the better goalie in net. That could work. If not, yeah, I don't know how. I think Monty starts the next 4 games, and then you get Primo against Philly, and then Monty starts the next like 4 games after that. Like Monty's your clear starter right now unless he plays bad, right? So unless he's really really bad over the next 4 games, I just don't see how Primo gets a start personally. So or if there's injuries, obviously, if he gets hurt, then it's a different
Yeah,
story.
well,
But
look, I think this. I think if he plays well enough against Philly, then you get the Washington game on the road, and then you continue. They continue their kind of road trip. They play Pittsburgh in the next month.
right.
If you look at it there, maybe they give them one of those 2 games just based on they're
Or
showing confidence in him.
they'll give him the Calgary game that's like a random game on a Tuesday in Montreal before a 4 game road trip. Maybe they'll just say, you know what, we'll give you the Calgary game, and then they're on the road for the next 4 games anyways. So
Yeah, it could be. Could be. They could use different approaches here.
for sure.
But I think with the Habs, I think we could be fairly optimistic here that look, they'll be exciting. They've been exciting with Lane Hudson. That the kid is unbelievable out there.
Right.
You know, Cole Caulfield is flying. This is a team loaded with young up and coming talent. It's exciting because this is the core of their team for years to come. And add Demidov next year. Add Patrick Laine potentially in January or February, and then you got a team that could become a real offensive juggernaut down the line. I'm interested to see how they develop this year. I trust Martin St. Louis as a coach. I think if they could keep getting the goaltending, then like I said, the sky is the limit. And when I mean sky is the limit, I mean we could see massive upgrades compared to last season. Maybe not a team that's top 3 in the division, I wouldn't think. Never say never, obviously.
Right.
That was Marc Bergevin's old saying.
Hmm.
But I think they could be. I think they're going to be in the mix, and maybe come trade deadline. My prediction is that they'll be either just a couple points out, or they'll be in a wild card spot. Probably
Interesting.
bold, but I've liked what I've seen so far with the Habs. They're very exciting, and they're committed to St. Louis style. And yeah, like I said, goaltending is going to be the key for them.
I agree. I think if Montembeau can continue playing like you said, I think if Montembeau plays the way he's been playing, I do think that they have an opportunity here to do something special. We'll see. I don't want to give playoff aspirations because I don't think it's realistic. I don't think Montreal's quite there yet, but I do want them to be competitive, and I think they have been through 4 games this year so far. Um, as long as they're fighting for a playoff spot and they're in the mix, I think that's good enough for the fans. Obviously,
Absolutely.
if they make it, they make it, which would be great. But they can't be bottom of the league again, right? They have to be able to have some sort of progression. And so I think if they're showing progress and they're in the mix, I think that's good enough for the fans, at least for this season. And then, obviously next year you can look at, next summer and figure out what you need to improve for potentially getting back into the playoffs.
Yeah,
So that's
I'll ask you this. We're gonna do a quick over or under before we finish this video.
right.
So Uri Slafkovsky, over under 70 points.
Under 65.
Okay, I agree. Lane Hudson, over under 50 points.
With the way he's playing, he could hit the over. But can I just do even? I think he hits 50 exactly.
Okay, you could do the even.
Even.
I'm gonna
I
go
think
over
he
with
could
Lane
hit 50
Hudson.
exactly.
I wouldn't be surprised if he hits that 60, 65 point mark, and is obviously would be in the Calder conversation. And
I think he's definitely in Calder consideration though. By the end
as of right now, he's in the top 3. He's probably wins it for all we know. If the
well,
Calder was awarded right
him
now,
and Stankoven right now, yeah.
Yeah.
And Seamus Casey, actually. Seamus Casey of the Devils has been pretty good too.
Yeah. Michkov got 2 goals too the other night. He's
Yeah.
in the mix as well. And
They've
the
got
last
there's some
one,
good rookies, man. But I think Hudson could be in the conversation come the end of the year for sure.
I think so. I think so, definitely. And last one, Cole Caulfield, over under 40 goals.
The man who never scored man who never scored the best
The
40
best
goal
40
scorer to
goal
never
scorer.
score 30. Under 40 goals, I don't think he hits 40. I think it would be unrealistic to say he's going to hit 40 when he hasn't hit 30. I do think he'll get close, though. I think if he's healthy on a full season and producing at the level that he's capable of, I think between 35 and 37 could be where he's at.
Yeah, I would say 35.
I don't think he hits 40.
range.
I think the only way he hits 40 is if like he really goes on a tear, and unless he stays really consistent all year. But I think we have to see Caulfield hit 35 before we can say he can hit 40. You know what I mean? Like you can't go from scoring 26 or 28 that he scored last year to 40. I feel like that's just way too high. And obviously,
I think Habs fans will be happy if he hits 30 for the first time this year. But even at that, are you happy with? Obviously you look at his salary.
I think he has to hit 35. I don't think I think 30
I think he can just hit like the 31. I think he's got to be at least close to 40.
Yeah. I think if he hits 35, you can turn around and say, okay, that was a good season. I think anything under like 33, you're like, I don't know. I expected a bit more because he is getting paid $7.8 million, right? So he's got to play like it. And I think through 4 games he has, but he has to continue that consistency throughout the year. He's got 78 more games. He's got to score during that time to reach that mark. Let's say it's 33. He would need to score 29 in his next 78 games, which he can clearly do. So I don't see why that would be an issue. But, with Cole Caulfield, he has lacked consistency throughout his tenure in Montreal so far. So we'll see it. And it's also a question of, is he going to play 82 games? If he plays 82 games, he can definitely do it. If he plays less than that, we'll see. Right? So
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
But yeah. But I think it's realistic to say that Hudson could hit 50. I also think it's realistic to say that he hits 40. I think for Slafkovsky, I think 65 points would be a really good return for him this year. I think point of gains, not unrealistic. I think it's way too high of expectations just because, a player needs to develop and sometimes it takes a little bit of a gradual development. I think last year we saw in the second half of the year that he was able to be fantastic. I think between 65 and 70 points would be really ideal for Slafkovsky. If he hits 65, I think it's successful. And then for Caulfield, obviously, I think if he hits 35, you can turn around and say that's a good season. 35 points, let's say 35 goals, let's say 75 points for Caulfield would be about where I think fans would be happy with him. Especially
and I think we could agree that it's got to be 65 plus or at least
for Caulfield.
range.
Agreed. Definitely.
Yeah. And then Slav, anything, if he gets to that 60 point mark, let's not underestimate the fact that he's still 20 years old.
Right.
It's going to be his second full season pro.
Yeah. Third. Well,
his first year he was he missed
half of last year due to injury, but it's technically his third pro season.
Okay. And it's true. And it's probably going to be his, bearing an injury. It's going to be his first potentially 80 game season this year.
Correct.
Okay. Any final thoughts?
No, not much else to really say, to be honest.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Hit the like button on this video. Interact with us in the comments. Let us know what you think about the Habs. Are we too high on them? Are we too low on them? What do you guys think? What are your predictions for how the rest of the season is going to go for the Montreal Canadiens? Obviously, there's about 78 games left for the Habs. So we're really at the early stages here. We just wanted to shoot the shit a little bit. We love talking about the Habs. So guys, let us know what you think. Subscribe to our social medias. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.